For over a decade, the world was sold a carefully constructed fairy tale. It was a narrative of a single, unified family pot where one man and four wives lived in a state of shared abundance and spiritual harmony. We watched as they built lives, raised children, and seemingly shared the fruits of their collective labor. But what happens when the cameras stop rolling and the spotlight fades? What happens when loyalty reaches its breaking point and the ledgers finally come to light? Today, we are opening the vault on a secret financial reckoning that was never meant to be told. This is the story of a patriarch's empire collapsing under the weight of its own greed, revealed not in the court of public opinion, but in the cold, unforgiving light of forensic accounting. We have the receipts, the hidden bank statements, and the private filings that prove the ultimate betrayal of the family's most loyal member. If you want to see how the greatest illusion in reality TV history was shattered, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because what we are about to show you will change everything you thought you knew about the Brown family. The story of the Coyote Pass embezzlement begins in the dust of Arizona, on 14 acres of barren land that was promised to be a plural paradise, but instead became a financial graveyard. To understand the depth of the crime, you must first understand the battleground. For years, the family operated on a system of absolute blind trust. Every TLC paycheck, every business earning, and every cent of inheritance was poured into one central account. The agreement was simple and supposedly sacred: equal distribution for all four houses. But the reality was a predatory system designed to favor one wife while the others were systematically drained. Janelle Brown was the undisputed CFO of this family. She was the breadwinner, the logical mind, and the woman who sacrificed everything for the sake of the collective. When the family left Las Vegas, Janelle didn't just move, she liquidated her entire life. She poured her 401k, her savings, and the equity from her own home into the Coyote Pass dream. She believed in the vision of a shared future where every child would have a place to call home. But while Janelle was hauling water to a cramped RV in the dead of winter, a massive financial siphoning was occurring right under her nose. While she was living on the edge of financial ruin, Kody and Robyn were ensconced in a $1 million mansion, surrounded by high-end art and luxury goods that the family pot was never intended to be bought. The contrast was more than just a difference in lifestyle. It was a documented financial assault. Janelle, the woman who had worked her entire life to provide, found herself legally destitute while the patriarch demanded more and more. The family pot, once a symbol of unity, had become a tool of financial domestic abuse. As Janelle stood on that dusty land, looking at a property she had paid for but did not own, the realization finally began to set in. The money was gone. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had vanished into the ether, leaving her with nothing but an empty promise and a rising sense of dread. The audit began as a whisper, a quiet suspicion that things didn't add up. Janelle, ever the numbers person, began to notice discrepancies that could no longer be explained away by taxes or moving expenses. Every time she asked for her share to begin building her modest home, she was met with a wall of gaslighting and delays. Kody would scream about patriarchy and respect, using emotional volatility to mask the fact that the accounts were dry. But the numbers do not lie. They do not have emotions, and they do not care about spiritual doctrines. When Janelle finally hired a private auditor to look into the family's interconnected accounts, the sheer scale of the manipulation was staggering. It wasn't just a matter of poor spending, it was a calculated redirection of wealth. The forensic team uncovered a hidden, automated diversion of funds that had been operating for years. Within the inner circle, this began to be known as the son tax. Robyn was Kody's son, the favorite wife who basked in his constant attention, and to keep that sun shining, the other wives were forced to pay a literal price. Before any money was ever distributed to Janelle, Mary, or Christine for their basic living expenses, a staggering 40% administrative fee was skimmed off the top of the collective earnings. This money never touched the joint family accounts. It was bypassed entirely and funneled into a separate private trust managed exclusively by Kody and Robyn. This trust was allegedly meant for family emergencies, yet the records show it was used to settle Robyn's pre-existing debts, pay for private nannies, and fund a lifestyle of luxury that none of the other wives were allowed to share. This institutionalized discrimination was the bedrock of the Flagstaff move. The move itself was never about finding a new home. It was a financial maneuver designed to consolidate power and equity into a single household. In Las Vegas, the wives had separate homes with separate equity. They had a level of autonomy that made them difficult to control. By forcing the sale of those homes and moving everyone to Flagstaff, Kody was able to reset the financial board. He convinced them to pool their resources into the Coyote Pass land and the large family home, effectively stripping them of their individual assets. Janelle, believing in the dream, handed over her power. She didn't realize that by signing those papers, she was signing away her financial freedom to a man who had already decided she was expendable. The deeper the auditors dug, the more the illusion of the family pot crumbled. They found shell companies with cryptic names, offshore accounts that had been opened during the height of the show's popularity, and a web of loans that were taken out against property Janelle thought was clear and free. The betrayal was not just emotional, it was mechanical. It was a slow-motion robbery of a woman who had spent 30 years building a legacy for her children, only to find that the patriarch had decided her children were no longer a priority. The audit revealed that while Janelle was making sacrifices, Kody was making acquisitions. While Janelle was worrying about the cost of gravel for the Coyote Pass driveway, Kody was purchasing thousands of dollars in jewelry and art that would eventually be stored in Robyn's home, out of sight of the other wives. The financial devastation Janelle faced was absolute. She had no house in her name that was fully paid for. She had no retirement fund left. She was living in a trailer on a piece of land that was tied up in a legal nightmare of Kody's making. The woman who had been the family's financial rock was now standing on shifting sand. This was the moment the fairy tale died. This was the moment the forensic accounting began to peel back the layers of the DABSARK LLC, revealing a structure designed not for a family of 4 wives and 18 children, but for a family of 1 wife and her specific chosen offspring. The acronym itself was a slap in the face, a public declaration of who truly mattered in Kody's world. As we move into the heart of this investigation, the evidence becomes even more damning. We are about to look at the specific wire transfers, the forged signatures, and the moment the patriarch realized that his reign was coming to an end. The secret trial was about to begin, and Janelle Brown was no longer the quiet, compliant wife. She was a woman with a mountain of evidence and nothing left to lose. The financial empire Kody had built was about to be brought to its knees, not by a rival or an enemy, but by the very woman who had built it for him. The transition from the shared family pot to the DABSARK era was the final nail in the coffin of plural marriage, and the fallout would be more explosive than anyone could have imagined. The world was about to see that when you steal from a woman who has given you everything, you don't just lose her loyalty, you lose your entire legacy. The audit's first phase concluded with a terrifying realization. The family was not just broke, they were being systematically hollowed out from the inside. Every time a new season of the show was negotiated, Kody fought for more control over the distribution of the funds. He moved the money through a series of accounts that grew increasingly opaque, making it nearly impossible for the other wives to track where their earnings were going. But Janelle kept records. She had kept her own ledgers for years, and when the 2 sets of books were compared, the discrepancies were in the millions. This was the beginning of the end. The illusion was shattered, the receipts were out, and the reckoning had finally arrived. As the sun set over the quiet, desolate hills of Coyote Pass, Janelle Brown sat in her RV, clutching a manila envelope that contained the truth. It was a truth that would destroy her marriage, her family structure, and the man she had loved for 3 decades. But it was also a truth that would set her free. The embezzlement was real, the betrayal was deep, and the fight for justice was just beginning. The patriarch thought he had won, but he had forgotten one crucial detail. Janelle was the one who knew where all the bodies were buried, because she was the one who had balanced the books. The discovery of DABSARK was the moment the financial shadow play became a documented conspiracy. It wasn't just a name or a business filing. It was a manifesto of exclusion. The acronym itself served as a brutal boundary line. Dayton, Aurora, Brianna, Solomon, Ariella, Robyn, and Kody. 7 names. 7 seats at a table that used to accommodate 23. For Janelle, Seeing those letters on a legal document was like watching a ghost inhabit her own home. This was the entity Kody had been building in the dark, while the rest of the family was distracted by the drama of moving trucks and property lines. The DABSARK Entertainment LLC wasn't just created to manage media talent. It was a vault designed to house the stolen equity of 3 other women. Forensic analysts tracing the flow of funds found that the moment a TLC payment hit the primary family account, a silent, pre-programmed internal transfer would trigger. This wasn't the slow leak of bad spending. It was a high-speed siphon. Tens of thousands of dollars were being rerouted into DABSARK before the other wives even had the chance to check the balance of the joint account. This wasn't just a preference for one wife. It was the systematic deconstruction of the plural family's financial foundation. The knockout punch, however, was hidden within the county land records of Flagstaff. Janelle had poured her life savings into the purchase of the Coyote Pass parcels, believing that her name on the deed was her ultimate security. But Kody, acting with a predatory legal cunning, had orchestrated a series of property reallocations that Janelle never fully understood until it was too late. Under the guise of simplifying the lots for future building permits, Kody convinced the wives to sign documents that altered the ownership structure. What he didn't tell Janelle was that these new filings gave him the power to use the land as collateral without her explicit, informed consent for each individual transaction. In late 2022, while Janelle was struggling to find the funds to even begin a foundation for her small home, Kody took out a massive private loan against the very dirt Janelle had bled for. He didn't use that money for infrastructure, for utilities, or to clear the debt on the property. Instead, the paper trail shows that the 6-figure sum was wired directly into the DABSARK account. He was effectively stripping the value out of Janelle's only remaining asset and handing it to Robyn's household. The investigation into these transfers revealed a level of deception that bordered on criminal wire fraud. When the private auditors tracked the digital footprints of the authorization forms, they hit a wall of metadata that shattered Kody's defense. One specific document, a land reallocation form that appeared to bear Janelle's signature, was flagged for inconsistencies. The forensic digital analysis showed that the document had been signed electronically, but the IP address used to execute that signature didn't originate from Janelle's RV or her mobile devices. It originated from the high-speed internet connection inside Kody and Robyn's mansion. The patriarch had allegedly bypassed the very woman who had funded his lifestyle, using Robyn's laptop to forge the consent required to cannibalize Janelle's equity. This was no longer a family dispute about spending habits. It was a felony-level betrayal of trust. Janelle wasn't just being left behind. She was being robbed by a man who claimed to be her spiritual head. As the evidence mounted, the sheer scale of Robyn's sun tax became undeniable. The forensic team cataloged years of luxury spending that had been categorized in the family ledgers as miscellaneous expenses. While Janelle was meticulously tracking the cost of every gallon of water and every tank of propane for her trailer, Robyn's household was a black hole of consumption. The auditors found receipts for high-end jewelry from David Yurman, thousands of dollars in Victoria's Secret debt settled with family funds, and a collection of expensive art that lined the walls of the mansion. Art that was purchased with money Janelle believed was being saved for the Coyote Pass build. The discrimination was institutionalized. The system was rigged so that Janelle, the primary earner for decades, would remain in a state of perpetual financial anxiety, while Robyn, who had never contributed a significant outside income, sat on a mountain of equity and luxury goods. The psychological impact of this discovery was devastating. Janelle had prided herself on being the logical one, the one who saw the world through the clear lens of mathematics. To realize that her own logic had been used against her, that her trust in the numbers had been exploited by someone cooking the books, was a soul-crushing revelation. She realized that the family pot was never a safety net. It was a snare. It was a mechanism designed to keep the OG wives working and producing, while the legal wife and the patriarch harvested the rewards. The DABSARK filings were the final proof that Kody had already moved on from the plural marriage, long before the official breakups occurred. He had spent years preparing for a life where Janelle, Mary, and Christine didn't exist, all while using their labor to fund that very future. When Janelle finally confronted Kody with the binder of evidence, the reaction wasn't one of remorse or explanation. It was an explosion of patriarchal rage. Kody didn't deny the transfers. Instead, he doubled down on his right to control the money. He argued that as the head of the family, the money belonged to him by divine right. He claimed that Janelle's independence was a form of rebellion, and that her insistence on financial transparency was an act of betrayal. In his mind, the wives were not partners, they were subjects, and the resources they brought into the family were his to distribute as he saw fit. He viewed the DABSARK entity as a way to protect the family's future, conveniently ignoring the fact that he was only protecting one specific branch of the family tree while leaving the others to rot in the sun. But Janelle had spent 30 years watching Kody's patterns. She knew that his bravado was a mask for deep-seated financial insecurity. She knew that if she took this evidence to the authorities, the entire TLC empire would crumble. The secret trial wasn't held in a public courthouse, but in a high-stakes mediation room where the air was thick with decades of resentment. Janelle didn't bring tears to this battle. She brought a 3-ring binder of terror. She sat across from the man she had loved, flanked by attorneys who specialized in forensic, accounting, and real estate fraud. The tone was lethal. Janelle's lead counsel laid out the wire transfers, the IP address logs, and the DABSARK filings with a clinical precision that left Kody no room to maneuver. The cross-examination during that mediation was a brutal deconstruction of Kody's mythos. When asked to explain the $150,000 transfer from the joint account to DABSARK on the same day Janelle was told there was no money for her building permit, Kody's defense was an incoherent stream of consciousness about loyalty and the big picture. He attempted to frame the embezzlement as a spiritual necessity, claiming he was rebalancing the family's assets because Janelle had too much power. But the law doesn't recognize spiritual rebalancing. The law recognizes deeds, titles, and fiduciary duties. When the mediator pointed out that the signatures on the land documents appeared to be fraudulent, the color drained from Kody's face. He wasn't looking at a divorce settlement. He was looking at a potential prison sentence. Robyn's role in the mediation was equally telling. She sat in the corner, her face a mask of practiced victimhood, claiming she had no knowledge of the finances. But the paper trail told a different story. Her name was on the DABSARK filings. Her signature was on the purchase orders for the artwork. Her laptop was the one used to access the accounts. The favorite wife was a full partner in the financial amputation of Janelle Brown. The illusion of the confused and stressed sister wife was shattered by the cold reality of her being a co-conspirator in a scheme to monopolize the family's wealth. They had gambled on Janelle's continued silence and her deep-seated desire to keep the family together, but they had underestimated her breaking point. They had pushed the most stable, reliable member of the family until she had nothing left to lose, and in doing so, they had handed her the match that would burn their entire kingdom down. The mediation stretched into the late hours of the night. Every time Kody tried to pivot to emotional manipulation, Janelle's lawyers brought it back to the ledger. They showed the sun tax calculations, the 40% skim that had crippled Janelle's ability to build her own home. They showed the emergency fund being used to buy David Yurman bracelets, while Janelle's children were told there was no money for college tuition. The sheer immorality of the spending was a weight that Kody couldn't lift. He had spent years convincing himself that he was a provider, but the numbers proved he was a parasite. He was a man who had built a mansion on the backs of women he was now trying to discard without a penny to their names. As the first part of the mediation concluded, the power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Kody Brown, the man who demanded blind obedience, was now at the mercy of the woman he had tried to bankrupt. He was facing a choice: settle on Janelle's terms, or face a public trial that would reveal every dark secret of the DABSARK empire. The family pot was gone, replaced by a legal battlefield where only one side had the ammunition of truth. Janelle walked out of that room with a cold, clear-eyed resolve. She wasn't just fighting for her money anymore. She was fighting for her dignity and for the future of her children. The patriarch's empire was on the verge of total collapse, and the world was about to see exactly what happens when the logic of the accountant finally catches up to the ego of the king. The final phase of the audit was about to reveal the most shocking betrayal of all, a move so calculated and so cruel that it would ensure the family could never, ever be repaired. It involved the final disposition of Coyote Pass and a secret plan to move the remaining family assets into a trust that excluded every single one of Janelle's children. The discovery of this trust was the final straw, the moment Janelle decided that peace was no longer an option. She was ready to go to war, and she had the financial maps to ensure Kody and Robyn had nowhere left to hide. The reckoning was no longer coming. It was already here. The investigation reached its chilling zenith when the auditors uncovered the Heritage Trust. This was a document so deeply buried that it required a court order to unearth, and its contents were the ultimate evidence of Kody's long-game betrayal. While he was publicly preaching the importance of the family legacy on Coyote Pass, he had secretly established a trust that named only Robyn and her 5 children as beneficiaries. Every acre of land, every cent of the media earnings, and every asset purchased with the collective family pot was slated to be inherited exclusively by Robyn's line. The children Janelle had raised, the sons and daughters who had worked alongside their father for years, were legally erased from the family's future. This was the final, absolute proof that the patriarch had transitioned from a polygamous leader to a man who had effectively started a new life while using his old one as a bank account. The realization was a cold, sharp blade to the heart of the family. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the total intended dispossession of Janelle's children. This was the moment the secret trial turned from a financial dispute into an execution of Kody Brown's reputation. Janelle's legal team played their final card with a lethal, quiet confidence. They presented the evidence of the forged IP addresses, the unauthorized loans, and the discriminatory sun tax skimmed to Kody's counsel with a simple ultimatum. There would be no more delays, no more gaslighting about spiritual leadership, and no more excuses. Either Kody and Robyn would sign a comprehensive settlement that fully compensated Janelle for 30 years of labor and lost equity, or the evidence would be handed over to the state prosecutor for a full investigation into wire fraud and financial elder abuse. The room went silent as the weight of the mountain of evidence finally crushed the patriarch's ego. The threat of a public criminal trial, which would not only land him in prison but also permanently end his television career and any future earnings, was the only thing that could pierce his delusion. The man who had spent decades demanding total control was suddenly faced with the reality that he had lost everything because he couldn't stop siphoning the pot. The settlement was a total and absolute victory for the woman who had been silenced for so long. Faced with the destruction of his remaining world, Kody caved. He was forced to sign over a massive portion of his remaining liquid assets and take out yet another loan, this time a legitimate one, to buy Janelle out of her shares of Coyote Pass at triple the current market value. This premium wasn't just for the land. It was a calculated penalty for the years of the sun tax and the emotional trauma of the financial betrayal. The agreement also mandated the immediate dissolution of the DABSARK LLC's claim on any funds generated by Janelle's individual business ventures, and a full accounting of the family's remaining debts. Janelle didn't just get her money back. She secured a level of financial independence that ensured her children would never be at the mercy of Kody's whims again. The woman who had lived in an RV to save the family's dream walked away with the keys to her own future, leaving the patriarch in a crumbling kingdom of his own making. The aftermath of the settlement left Kody and Robyn in a state of gilded isolation. To pay the settlement, they were forced to liquidate the very luxuries they had stolen from the family pot. The high-end art was sold off, David Yurman jewelry was returned or pawned, and the million-dollar mansion became a hollow monument to a broken dream. They were left with the land of Coyote Pass, but it was now a haunted place, a reminder of the family they had discarded in the name of greed. The relationship between the remaining couple and the rest of the family was permanently severed. By hoarding the wealth, they had bought themselves a mansion, but they had lost the very people who made that mansion a home. The plural marriage was dead, buried under the weight of 1,000 fraudulent transactions and a decade of systematic embezzlement. The legacy Kody so desperately wanted to build was reduced to a cautionary tale of what happens when a leader forgets that loyalty is a two-way street. Janelle Brown is now a woman of significant means, but more importantly, she is a woman of absolute dignity. She transitioned from the family's CFO to the architect of her own life, proving that numbers don't lie even when the people around you. She stands as a testament to the power of standing one's ground and the importance of keeping one's own books. The illusion of the family pot was shattered, but in its place, something more honest was built. The secret trial of Kody Brown is over, and the verdict is clear. You can demand obedience, you can demand respect, and you can demand love, but the moment you touch the bottom line of the people you claim to protect, you have already lost. The patriarch's empire fell not because of a lack of faith, but because of a lack of integrity. Janelle walked away not just with her money, but with the knowledge that she was the one who truly held the power all along. This investigation into the financial collapse of the Brown family serves as a stark reminder that even the most beautiful fairy tales have a cost. If this deep dive into the hidden ledgers and legal battles of Coyote Pass has opened your eyes to the truth behind the cameras, then your support is what keeps these investigations going on. This story is far from over, and there are more vaults to be opened and more secrets to be revealed about the reality of the Brown family's final days. If you want to be the first to see the next chapter of this financial reckoning, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to this channel right now. Your engagement ensures that the truth continues to be told and that the voices of those who were silenced are finally heard. Don't miss our upcoming exposé on the final fate of the other sister wives. Subscribe now and join us as we continue to uncover the reality behind reality TV.